Back here on HQ, some big injury news out there. Commanders quarterback Jayden Daniels will make his return on Sunday against the Vikings. Head coach Dan Quinn announcing he'll start against Minnesota after missing the past 3 games with a dislocated left elbow. Washington lost all 3 games during that stretch, and it's been an injury-riddled year for Jayden Daniels, who has ultimately missed 6 games this season due to knee, hamstring, and elbow injuries. So it is Friday, and we have got to talk about players coming off of injuries, players that are going to be out, and what this all means for your fantasy football team. And for that, let's bring in our fantasy expert, Adam Aizer. Adam, great to see you. Jayden Daniels making his return against Minnesota. So how do we approach this? Where is he stacking up in terms of your QB rankings for Week 14?
Yeah, I think a little cautiously for Week 14, but I'm pretty excited about it. First of all, if you don't need a quarterback this week and you just need somebody on your bench, it's a great guy to get. He's 79% rostered, and after this week, he has a terrific schedule with the Giants coming up, and I think he has Dallas in the fantasy championship, so you definitely want to get Jayden Daniels. Look, I think it's okay to throw him back in there. We've seen Marcus Mariota be around 20 fantasy points most weeks and had that boom week last week against the Broncos. Jayden Daniels is going to be better than that. He's only played 2 games all year with Terry McLaurin, and he was good, not great, but good in both of those. 22.1 fantasy points, 23.7 fantasy points in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. My hesitation is that the Vikings have allowed 1 touchdown pass in their last 4 games. Their defense is playing at an outstanding level right now against the pass, but I believe in Jayden Daniels, and I like these rankings here. I would start him over Patrick Mahomes. Other than that, I like the rankings the way they are. He'd be 8 for me.
Okay, got to talk about Lamar Jackson, who's right there at 12, because obviously he is not 100% healthy. We can all tell he is active in this very crucial AFC North matchup for the Steelers. So talk to us more about why Lamar right there at 12, because yes, he's hurt, but also this is a big game for the division.
It's a huge game, and his fantasy production last week was really bad. But if you dissect it a little bit more, you had a dropped deep ball, 2 drop deep balls in this game. You had Isaiah Likely going in for a touchdown and fumbling at the goal line. You had Zay Flowers with a long touchdown pass that was called back on an iffy pass interference penalty. And you had an interception in the red zone. That was Lamar's fault. I mean, the ball got tipped, but you had a lot of scoring opportunities that didn't happen. So if he had put up a big number against the Bengals, we'd probably feel better about him against the Steelers. But he's averaging 3.2 yards per carry since returning from injury the first time, and he's more beat up now than he was back then. For his career, he averages 6 yards per carry. Obviously, something's off here. You cannot start Lamar Jackson, just say, oh, I'm not even going to think about it. I'm going to start him. You cannot be there with Lamar Jackson. If you have better options like Jayden Daniels and Jordan Love to me is pretty iffy. I think I would actually go with Lamar Jackson, but they're close. But I would go with him over a guy like Caleb Williams or an injured Daniel Jones or something like that. I'd still go with him over Trevor Lawrence, even though Lawrence is pretty interesting. I'm expecting about 21, 22 fantasy points for Lamar Jackson. An okay, solid game, but nothing great.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're someone like me who has Trevor Lawrence as your fantasy quarterback, 22, 21 points, that's pretty good on a regular week, right? Okay, let's get to some receivers. T. Higgins. I have him on one of my fantasy teams. He's coming back. I don't care. I'm starting him. Is that the correct approach if you have T. Higgins on your squad?
It is, and I think we'll talk about Michael Wilson in a little bit, but Michael Wilson is a guy I would start over T. Higgins. But other than that, I can't imagine there's a waiver wire guy. I wouldn't start Luther Burden over him or anything like that. The only concern I have is the weather. It's probably going to snow. It's going to be cold. I don't think it's going to be too windy. If it's one of those games where it's just super snowy and one of those, winter wonderland games in Buffalo, then maybe you try to get away from T. Higgins. But I think, look, if Joe Burrow is healthy, I start T. Higgins and Jamar Chase every single week, and that's it.
Perfect. So we're on the same page. Odunze for Chicago, he is out against the Packers. So, Adam, walk us through what this means for the rest of that Bears offense.
This is really interesting, okay? This is their target leader. This is a guy who gets a lot of targets pretty much every week. If I liked Caleb Williams more, I would be more enthused about Luther Burden and DJ Moore and maybe even Colson Loveland. But I just don't think that Caleb Williams is going to have that good of a game. It's going to be frigid in this game. The Packers are a really good defense. But Luther Burden is someone you should pick up. I don't know. Look, he's been dealing with these foot and heel issues, Odunze, for a while. He's finally missing a game. There's no guarantee he's going to play next week. Luther Burden, yards per route run was one of my favorite wide receiver stats. It combines how often you're targeted and how well you do with those targets. Luther Burden is averaging as many yards per route run as Jamar Chase. He's averaging as many yards per target as CeeDee Lamb. Now, it's been all small sample size. He doesn't run that many routes, doesn't get that many targets. But there's a lot of potential here for Burden. I would prefer him to DJ Moore, but I still think DJ Moore, he now moves from a number 4 receiver to a number 3 receiver. Luther Burden will be in that number 4 receiver range. It's not going to take the chance on Colston Loveland. Very curious to see how this plays out, but there is definitely more potential for these guys than there was before Odunze was ruled out, obviously.
Okay, so let's get to Marvin Harrison Jr. for the Cardinals because he is out. A ton of injuries here. We know Kyler done for the year. Dortch, he is out. So you already mentioned Michael Wilson. So let's get to the Michael Wilson conversation here.
This is the best conversation we're going to have. I mean, this guy, I am so excited to start Michael Wilson. I look for him in every league because he had 33 targets in 2 games without Marvin Harrison Jr. And he had 2 huge games, and he didn't even score a touchdown in either of those games. So Michael Wilson, I would start him over T. Higgins. I would start him over A.J. Brown. Oh. I don't do rankings, but if I did, he'd probably be a top 10 wide receiver for me. 89% rostered. He's 68% started. That needs to be 95% rostered, 95% started. Start him in every single league. Michael Wilson to the moon. There's no other wide receiver. I would say Greg Dortch, but he's out, so there's no other wide receiver. And if you're playing against Trey McBride, better luck next week. He's going to have a huge game.
Okay, so write it down. Michael Wilson, that is someone you should start over T. Higgins. Maybe I should go do some last-minute waiver wire check-in and see if he's out there. Drake London, yeah, also a guy that's out against Seattle. So how do we approach that, and what does this mean for the rest of Atlanta's offense?
Unfortunately, Darnell Mooney is just too much of a risk right now. I'm going to go with Adonai Mitchell over him, Luther Burden over him, DJ Moore over him. I think I might even go with Devon Vele. That's pretty close. But Mooney's just not doing anything, really. He had a long touchdown catch a couple of weeks ago. The guy that we're focusing on here is Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is facing Seattle, and they are 4th worst against tight ends. And Kyle Pitts has had about a 26% target share 2 straight games with Drake London out and Kirk Cousins playing. And now 2 games ago, he didn't do anything with it because Kirk Cousins threw 23 passes. But last week, Kirk Cousins threw over 30 passes, and all of a sudden, you've got an 8-target game and a really good game for Kyle Pitts. So we like Kyle Pitts this week. He's a guy to start. I don't think the Falcons are just going to be able to run all over Seattle. They have one of the best run defenses in football. Seattle's going to put points on the board. I do think you're going to get more than 30 pass attempts, which means you'll probably get 7 or more targets for Kyle Pitts. I don't really trust him to be as good as he was last week. He had a season high in yak, over 8 yards, yak per catch. So I would think more like 5 catches for 50 yards, and hopefully there's a touchdown in there for Kyle Pitts. But he's the only one that really benefits from Drake London being out.
All right. Yeah, man, Kyle Pitts. I've been saying this is Kyle Pitts to the moon year for I don't even know how many years. I'm a Gator, so I'm always rooting for him, picking him up in fantasy, and then it doesn't pan out how I think it's going to pan out. Also want to get to Alvin Kamara because he is out against the Bucs. I asked you this in the commercial break. Has he really moved the needle in terms of fantasy anyways up until this point? So what does that mean ultimately with him being out?
I would answer this question, but I didn't know you were a Gator, so I think I have to end this interview. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
Throw up the U here for you, but
the control room is cheering for you, by the way. I need you to know that.
Good. You know what? Let's just hope the committee is cheering for me too. But look, Devin Neal, obviously, I think Devin Neal is a nice, safe play. He's going to get some touches. He scored about 10 points 2 weeks ago, about 11 PPR fantasy points last week. And I think that's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting flex type of production from Neal. But you never know. He could score because you're going to get a nice floor there for Devin Neal. You're probably going to get a few catches, a lot of touches. I think the best thing we saw last week was Taysom Hill got 1 carry. The week before, I think Taysom Hill had 10 carries. Taysom Hill's just not getting it done. But they didn't take Neal off the field for Taysom Hill last week. I expect that to continue. My only concern would be what happens at the goal line. That's probably Taysom Hill territory, but not definitely. So consider Devin Neal. If you hate your running back, like if you're Woody Marks or something like that, he's just not doing anything. He has a tough matchup. Let's go with Devin Neal and just see if we can get a nice, safe floor. We'll get a few catches there, some PPR, cheap PPR fantasy points. That's what we've got with Neal.
All right, Adam, we know Fridays, I always insert my own personal fantasy football question into this segment. And I don't have a lot these days, I'm not going to lie, because 2 out of my 3 teams are absolute trash. But we're going to try to salvage it if we can. Alec Pierce against the Jags or Scary Terry versus the Vikings? Who would you start?
Yeah, so the Vikings, again, they've been so good against the pass, but I'm still going to go with McLaurin here. Look, he just went up against Patrick Surtain and the Broncos and had an unbelievable week. He looked great doing it, and he didn't even run all of his routes. Like, he sat out a little bit. They pulled him. So I expect a higher snap share this week for McLaurin. Alec Pierce is a good option. I'm debating between Alec Pierce and Luther Burden in one league. I think I'm going to stick with Pierce, but I'm going to go with Terry McLaurin here. Tough matchup, but you got to go with him. He's Terry McLaurin, right? Let's give him a shot.
Scary Terry it is. Adam, we certainly appreciate it. Running through the injury report here on a Friday and what this means for your fantasy team. Hey, to hear Adam and the guys, make sure you check out Fantasy Football Today. They're always answering your biggest fantasy questions, helping you win your league. You can watch right now by scanning that QR code on your screen.